Oh, wait.
Folks, where's Venezuela?
It's right above Brazil. It's the one in the middle.
Above Brazil. The Caribbean coastline.
No.
That's Peru.
Venezuela?
No, that's Colombia. That's the one.
Okay,
That
very good. All right. Okay, quick note on the borders. Codepink would like to let y'all know that the state of Venezuela, the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, does prefer this map here. That's because there is a disputed territory with the country east of Venezuela called Guyana. Venezuela claims the Essequibo region. Um, I'm not personally taking a stand on this issue, but just be aware of this. So even though we're looking at some maps that do depict it like this is preferred by Codepink, and this is also the one preferred by the U.S. and British. So this is why it's important to just be aware of that.
So, which one is preferred by the U.S. and British?
This one,
That one.
but Venezuela, Codepink prefers this one, but this area is disputed.
Is that claim?
Which has oil in it, right?
Yes, it has. It's been claimed by Venezuela for over 100 years, but they've renewed their claims and got more aggressive about it once offshore oil was discovered. But just want to be aware of that. All right, let's briefly go over some of the history. I'm gonna lecture for a little bit. Feel free to stop me, ask questions, raise your hand. But let's just go over a bit about the history because a lot of people were curious about this. All right, so let's go to the next slide, please. I think we should talk a little bit about the indigenous people that lived there before Europeans. So we'll go over four main indigenous groups that lived here. So humans migrated from Asia down to South America across the Bering Land Strait, and that's where the indigenous people came from here. Two main groups I want to share with you are the Timoto Cuicas, which lived over here in the western region of Venezuela. They're probably the group that invented arepas. If you guys know that Venezuelan cuisine, there's a good restaurant in town called Viva Las Arepas. And they had these terraced farming areas, very advanced society. And you guys might have heard of these guys, Muiscas, because they had a beautiful gold jewelry and sculpture. And if you guys have seen the movie El Dorado or have heard of the Tales of a City of Gold, this comes from this group here. Let's go ahead and go on to the next slide. So when Europeans did arrive, the main groups that were living there were the Arawak and the Carib people. These are peoples that lived in the Caribbean as well. Caribbean is named after these folks here. They were seafarers, but they also settled on the South American continent as well. So the Arawak were sedentary farmers. They fished and hunted. Their societies were generally non-hierarchical and generally autonomous. Here's a photograph of some Arawak people. And the Caribs were in the Caribbean, but also lived on land. They grew things like cassava, yucca, hunted with bows and arrows and blowguns. And these are some of the first people who met Columbus in Venezuela. Let's go ahead and move on. Just wanted to touch on some indigenous groups today. Today, the indigenous people in Venezuela are referred to as Amerindian, and they're about 2% of the population today. Most of them, over 51%, are Wayu people. So the groups that we just talked about generally are not prevalent in Venezuela anymore. And these are the main indigenous groups. If you go to the next slide, you can see that they mostly live in the southern region of Venezuela. We'll talk about Hugo Chavez later. He is really the first president of Venezuela with indigenous heritage. All right, let's do a quick activity I do with my kids. Take a look at this map from 1489. What is missing from this world map?
America.
Yeah, so that's because something happens in 1492 where Europeans find out about America. Do you guys know what happens in 1492?
Boo.
Okay. All right. Let's go to the next slide, please. All right, so most of y'all know Christopher Columbus, Cristobal Colon, goes by many names. A lot of people are not a fan of him because of how he's treated Native peoples and the beginning of the genocide of indigenous peoples in America as a result of his practices. He was an enslaver, a sex criminal, and just kind of a bad guy. But he was actually personally one of the first Europeans to visit Venezuela on his third trip in 1498.
Oh, sure.
Yep. So we looked at another map last time, and this is the first map in 1507 to name America. So this is the first time America was ever written down on this document here, and we've been able to find this. It was actually named after Amerigo Vespucci, who also visited Venezuela. So let's go ahead and talk about him real quick. He served on the expedition of Alonso de Ojeda and the Americas. And why is Venezuela called Venezuela? It's actually named after a European city. Has anyone been to Venice before? I haven't got a chance to go. Very threatened by flooding and global warming right now. But it's a city of canals and lots of waterways. So they call it Venezuela Little Venice because of the bays that they were able to sail into over there. All right, so we know that, as Angie told us earlier, that Venezuela was colonized by Spain, and they captured it and took it over for the next few hundred years, and they're mainly focused on growing cacao and cocoa beans, which sound similar and look similar, but they're different. You guys know what is made from cacao? Chocolate, that's right. All right. Go ahead and go to the next slide. If you're not familiar, which I don't assume everyone is,
Is that 500 years of resistance?
it is. Yeah, I remember you talked about that in your class. But I show this to my kids as well. This is a good book by Gord Hill about indigenous resistance to colonialism. He defines colonialism as the invasion and occupation of other countries for political and economic benefits. So this is what Spain is doing in the Americas and in Venezuela. Okay, I also just wanted to share with you a few quotes from this book, which I used to help me research this topic. This is one of the most famous books on Latin American history, so I definitely recommend it. Anyone familiar with the topic will know this book. It's called Open Veins of Latin America by Eduardo Galeano. Not everyone is a fan of him, but this scholarship is definitely important. He talks about colonialism, imperialism, and how it's affected the Americas to this day. But the book was originally published in 1970, but it's still important. And, why is it important to Venezuela in particular? Actually, Hugo Chavez, the president of Venezuela, is quoted as saying, "This book is a monument in our Latin American history." So important for Venezuela in particular. So he writes in his book, a quotation we'll read next about the economy of Venezuela during the colonial period. If we go to the next slide. He says, for a long time, Venezuela was identified with cacao, a native South American plant. Venezuelans, as Domingo Rangel says, have been made to sell cacao and distribute foreign trinkets in their own lands. Cacao coexisted with indigo, sugar, tobacco, and a few mines and cattle raising on the plains, but the people correctly supplied cacao to Mexico's mining oligarchy in Caracas, which supplied cacao. We want to move this one.
I was trying, but I was
Uh-oh.
like maybe how okay.
You drag the bar.
There we go.
All right.
Yay.
To Mexico's mining oligarchy and to Spanish metropolis, thus using, quote, black labor to enrich itself. All right, so we know that slavery was used to cultivate cacao and later coffee in Venezuela during the colonial period. Let's go ahead and move on. So that was what the economy was like before oil, and we'll talk about how it changes. But Francisco de Miranda was one of the people that calls for Venezuelan independence first. He was born in the 1700s, but his actions mostly take place in 1800. In 1806, he actually invades Venezuela as someone from Venezuela to try and liberate it from Spanish rule. And that doesn't work out for him, but he's seen as the precursor to Venezuelan independence. Venezuela does declare independence in 1810, But at the time, the leaders of the independence movement were still pro-Spanish. They only declared independence because Spain got captured by France during the Napoleonic Wars, and they were loyal to the king. But that was the first Venezuelan independence movement. So we'll go on to quick map. You can see that Latin America was mostly ruled by Spain and Portugal, and then by 1830, most of these countries have gained independence, mostly connected with the exploits of San Martin and Bolivar. So who was Simón Bolivar? He's Jonas, are you familiar?
Of the movement for independence in Venezuela and also across other Latin American countries like Colombia and Bolivia.
Excellent.
So created an independent state in northern South America that comprised Colombia and Venezuela.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Jonas. You predicted our next slide. So Simón Bolivar is one of the most famous revolutionaries that is known for, quote, liberating Latin America. Somewhat controversial, but still very important. He gives his name to the country Bolivia and also the country of Venezuela, the Bolivarian Republic, also gets his name put in there as well. Question?
He also traveled.
He does travel a lot. So you have a little background knowledge on this one? Excellent. Yeah, we looked at the map, all the places he went. Okay, so like Jonas said, he actually founds this country, which included modern-day countries of Colombia, Ecuador, Panama, Peru, parts of Brazil, but Venezuela as well. So Venezuela was part of this larger country called Gran Colombia. Bolivar had hoped to create a United States of Latin America and unite South America at one point, but his dream is not realized, and after his death in 1830, the country splits apart, and Venezuela has been an independent country since then. So that's some brief background on Venezuela from the pre-colonial period to colonization to independence. All right. Keep it rolling. Venezuela's had a variety of leaders since then. We're not going to go through each of them. We'll fast forward to modern history in a moment, but just know that they've had dictators, left-wing labor leaders, conservatives, progressives, of all types vying for power over these 150 years or so. Okay. So I'll briefly read this, but this is a bit about the economy after independence. We talked about how they grew coffee. He says a coffee era began in Venezuela in 1873. Coffee, like cacao, needs sloping lands or warm valleys. Despite this competition, cacao continued to expand, invading humid lands of Codepink. Venezuela remained an agricultural country, condensed the cyclical rise and fall of coffee and cacao prices. The two products created the capital that enabled landlords, merchants, and moneylenders to live as wasteful parasites, according to Galeano. Then in 1922, the country suddenly became a fountain of oil, and oil has reigned without interruption ever since. The black gold finally gushed forth, justifying 4 centuries late the fantasies of Spanish conquistadors. Searching in vain for the king who bathed in gold, they had become mad enough to confuse the little Maracaibo village with Venice and the fetid coast of Paria with the earthly paradise. And this is why people like this book. It's very poetic, but that's what changes the history of Venezuela is the discovery of oil in 1922. The final thing I want to go over that's talked a lot about in terms of modern history of Venezuela is the Monroe Doctrine. We actually have this displayed in our school somewhere, but has anyone heard of this one before? Okay.
Very vaguely and very far
I
off
forgot about
in
it.
U.S. history.
Okay.
10 years ago.
Okay, so some background.
Thinking about it after 5 minutes today.
Yeah.
What's his name? We're hearing every day about it, ain't we?
Yeah. And our Codepink literature, we also talk about the new Monroe Doctrine. So what is the Monroe? So it's associated with James Monroe, who was the president in 1823. He comes out in his State of the Union address and says that South America is independent now. It's now off limits from European expansion and colonization. So from the face of it, sounds like Monroe is a champion. He's an anti-imperialist, a champion of Latin American independence. But he also says that Latin America is part of the U.S.'s sphere of influence, meaning that basically this is all the U.S.'s playground and backyard, and that Europe should stay out of it, but the U.S. still gets a role in determining the fate, destiny, and affairs of Latin America. And so a couple quotations from it, I'll just read from the address. He says, "The American continents, by the free and independent condition which they have assumed and maintain, are not to be considered as subjects for future colonization by any European powers. We should consider any attempt on their part to extend the system to any portion of this hemisphere as dangerous to our peace and safety." So basically kicking out the Europeans from the Western Hemisphere, but allowing the U.S. to continue to interfere in their affairs for hundreds of years.
We're the Anglos in charge.
Right. So let's switch over to the timeline put together by Codepink. So those are my slides. These ones are put together by Codepink. We're going to fast forward all the way to the 1980s, when really the current era of politics in Venezuela begins. So in 1989, there's massive protest over austerity, so limiting spending and by cutting programs that people need to accommodate the International Monetary Fund. A lot of developing countries like Venezuela borrow money and have to pay it back, end up having to cut programs with austerity. This is what we call neoliberalism, and it put them in a deep economic crisis. So Venezuela is already in trouble in the 1980s and 1990s. The U.S. kind of caves to the IMF. They adopt some reforms like privatization. They want to open up the oil sector to foreigners, even though they've already been involved in exploiting it for decades. And this is kind of a move welcomed by the Americans. But Hugo Chavez, probably the most important Venezuelan leader in modern history, basically states his resistance to the neoliberal regime, and he actually stages a coup in 1992 to try and take over the country, but fails. He was a member of the military at the time. So he's put in jail, but later freed and allowed to run for president later on. Go on to the next slide. He's elected president in 1998 after dissatisfaction with the neoliberal consensus that's formed, and he says he wants to be a man of the people. He wants to do things differently. And some of the early things that he does are he reclaims state control of the oil industries. He nationalizes the oil industry, meaning that any money from drilling and selling oil goes back to the Venezuelan state, which in theory is supposed to go back to the people. This makes him the enemy of Washington and elites who are benefiting from oil production in Venezuela, like ExxonMobil and other oil companies that are centered in America. So the U.S. tries to get rid of Hugo Chavez in 2002. They stage their own coup attempt, and they actually are able to kidnap Hugo Chavez, dissolve the constitution, but within 48 hours, the soldiers were loyal to Chavez. They liked him, and they're able to restore him to power within 2 days. So it was an unsuccessful coup against him. So this is how long that the U.S. has been meddling in Venezuela in recent history. In 2002 and 2003, the oil lobby and the Americans began to put economic pressure on Venezuela by targeting their oil industry. They freeze oil exports of the PDVSA, that's the Venezuelan oil company. The government responds by firing strikers, reasserting control, but the U.S. is also funding opposition groups. There's a lot of uproar over the defunding of U.S. aid, but we also know that it was also used to advance U.S. interests in Latin America and elsewhere. So let's move on.
This is W, right? There.
Yeah, there we go. George W. Bush, and there's a very famous clip of Hugo Chavez calling George Bush a donkey and calling him a name. All right. I remember that when I was a kid.
Call them the devil too.
He called him the devil. Yes. We'll try and play a clip from that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
He was.
Right. He looks. Everyone's nostalgic about him today.
Antichrist ain't coming. He wasn't.
All right. Okay. So in 2006, Bush and his regime launches a series of sanctions against Venezuela, blocking military cooperation with F-16s, and this is the start of the embargo to cripple the economy of the Venezuelan state. And this is the same strategy they've used against Cuba, Iran, and other countries that disagree with the American consensus, and basically makes it very hard for Venezuela to trade its oil and just sustain basic necessities for its people. So it's meant to encourage the Venezuelan public to rise up against their country because they're basically being starved by the embargo and sanctions. So that's the case for about 10 years. And let's go to the next slide. While this is going on, they're funding protests and opposition groups through USAID and NED. And there's a protest movement in 2014, the Carimbas, that was associated with some foreign capital. All right. In 2013, Hugo Chavez dies after a battle with cancer, even though he was reelected. So he hands the reins to his chosen successor, Nicolas Maduro, who is the president today, who's been controversial. He narrowly wins a victory after he's challenged by Henri Capriles. This is after Bush. Obama refuses to recognize Maduro's administration, claiming he was unelected, disputing the election, even though several observers of elections have claimed it was legitimate. There is some controversy over succeeding elections, but again, our job here is not to litigate that issue, but to talk about the U.S.'s role in this. Finally, Obama signs executive order labeling Venezuela a threat to U.S. security. So this is to tell you that this is both a Democrat and Republican initiative to
For all bums.
target Venezuela, Iran, etc. So Trump is in power in 2016. He issues an executive order cutting off Venezuela from U.S. assets and financial markets. So if the Venezuelan oil company wants to have assets in the U.S. or to be able to sell things in the U.S., it makes it much more difficult to do that. They also recognize Juan Guaido. I think you mentioned him earlier when you were talking to the Venezuelan woman. Juan Guaido is this guy over here. He basically comes out and claims he's the real president of Venezuela, not Nicolas Maduro. No one takes him that seriously except the United States government, which says, hey, yeah, that's the real president of Venezuela. He's never really able to take power, and now the opposition has kind of discarded him because he was never very popular. But for a while, Maduro was the president, but the U.S. only recognized him as the real leader of Venezuela. Let's go to 2020. At this point, the U.S. issues a $15 million bounty on Maduro personally and charges him of allegedly participating in narco-terrorism. And this sort of sets in motion the events of today.
This is Trump, right? Trump. So.
I believe so, yes.
Yeah.
So by this point, they've raised the bounty from 50 million up from 25 million earlier that year and 15 million originally in 2020. And as a result, they've started attacking boats in open waters, killing what are most likely civilians and others caught up in this so-called drug war. There's been no evidence offered by the U.S. administration that these boats are supposedly carrying drugs. Either way, these extrajudicial killings aren't authorized by Congress or really by any mandate of the people. So let's go ahead and watch a brief video if we have time. Kind of.
Where's it at?
Oh, wait, sorry.
Keep going.
Let's
How about that question? They keep saying that they have the largest oil reserves in the world. I thought Saudi Arabia did. In other words, they just,
Yeah.
I guess.
I believe it
They
is
go
still
through a lot, right?
one of it's untapped.
Is this the video?
It's over here. Let's go ahead and just watch the video real quick and then we can turn. Yes, it's the next
Keep
one
going.
over here. Okay, so just to catch you up on the current situation with the boats, and then we'll start.
Let's see if the sound is good enough for us to hear. Turn the
Okay.
Oh, coming through here.
Early September, President Donald Trump series strikes on both the Caribbean and the Pacific.
This is by ABC, but I think it gives a pretty good background.
In both countries, and many in Washington are questioning whether that's true, whether these strikes are even legal. It started on September 2nd. Trump posted a video online showing what he said was a strike on a, quote, Venezuelan narco-terrorist boat. Claimed 11 people killed related to Venezuelan Bureau denied it.
Venezuela es un país libre de producción de hoja de coca. Libre de producción de cocaína.
2 weeks later, there was another strike, this time killing 3 people. When asked by reporters about that strike, Trump said the incident occurred in international waters, and he insisted, quote, "We have proof that that boat was carrying drugs as the cargo that was in the ocean." On September 19th, the third strike followed, killing 3 more people. Trump alleged that they were working for an unspecified, quote, "designated terrorist organization." On October 3rd, Trump announced a 4th strike, 4 people killed, claiming that the vessel carried enough drugs to kill, quote, 25 to 50,000 people. Colombian President Gustavo Petro said one of those killed was a Colombian fisherman and was not involved in drug trafficking.
No hay necesidad de verlas. Es absolutamente fácil. No parece estar dirigida esa acción realmente a causar cocaína, sino a evasión, que también es absolutamente ilegal.
Trump used the Navy anniversary speech to announce yet another strike. 6 men killed in the Caribbean.
In recent weeks, the Navy has supported our mission to blow the cartel terrorists the hell out of the water.
And just days after that, October 16th, a strike left 2 survivors. They were quickly handed over to their home countries of Colombia and Ecuador, a move that prevented them from challenging their detention in court. Authorities in Ecuador later declined to file charges against their national, but Colombia said they would pursue a legal investigation on their individual. That same day, Admiral Alvin Halsey, the head of U.S. Southern Command, who oversees U.S. military operations in the region, announced that he was stepping down after less than a year in the post. By late October, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth said the campaign was expanding. The first Pacific strike happened on October 21st and killed 2 people aboard. The next day, the administration strikes yet again in the Pacific, killing 3 people. Then another strike on October 24th, just off the coast of Venezuela, killed 6 people. October 27th saw the biggest number of casualties, as 14 people were killed in 3 strikes in the Eastern Pacific, according to Hegseth. The administration says these operations are part of a broader effort to stop what they call narco-terrorism.
Every one of those boats is responsible for the death of 25,000 American people and the destruction of families. So when you think of it that way, what we're doing is actually an act of kindness. So, Mr. President, thank you for what you're doing. On behalf of all those Americans who will be saved from these poisonous drugs, thank you. Continue to do what you're doing.
But critics, including some members of Congress, argue that Trump may have overstepped his constitutional powers by launching military action without the approval of lawmakers.
The Constitution invests the authority to go to war with the United States.
So far, the U.S. has released no concrete evidence publicly linking the boats to drug trafficking or terrorists. It's the most extensive U.S. military campaign in Latin America in decades, and it's not clear where it's headed next.
All right. Maybe go to the next slide. That was a video that was released, I think about 2 months ago. So there's been some developments since then. You can see that by then we were already striking a number of boats, individuals, with the result of now more than 70 people killed by U.S. actions. No warrants, no people being charged with the crime, just execution on open waters in internationally ambiguous territory. So this is from 11 days ago. Trump has now said that he's authorizing strikes on land in Venezuela with potential boots on the ground, which would mean that we would essentially be at war with Venezuela. Just 3 days ago, the United States, supposedly with a warrant, seized an oil tanker off the coast of Venezuela. This kind of raises the question, is this having to do with drugs or with oil? So we'll briefly go back to the timeline. We'll go over some things. I think we can send this out, but I think let's just go ahead and start on the next part. Yes, question.
Yeah, I just want to ask a technical question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pick them up here.
Speak down. Supposedly with a warrant.
Right.
From whom?
I
Who would
don't
have the
know.
authority to issue such a warrant.
This story just broke. I'm not sure of the details.
Okay,
I don't know
wondering if
how
they
you
were
get a
making
warrant
any
to.
claim
Yeah.
or about like where that warrant comes from and on whose authority.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I'm not sure. There's
Okay,
something
fair.
like that, but
Okay.
yeah, this is the most recent story in the news about Venezuela. So if you look up Venezuela, that's what will be talked about. Okay. Can we go back a couple of slides? Sorry, 2 slides, please. Yeah. So we'll talk about this in a second, but so Codepink has put together this list of reasons why Venezuela is being targeted now. We talked about how Venezuela is rich in terms of resources, cacao, coffee, but mainly oil nowadays. And we know how the U.S. feels about oil and previous military exploits that have been waged over oil.
Sounds awful like Iraq, doesn't it?
Right.
It just sounds the same for saying we're all stupid, like go along with that.
Right.
Iraq was such the same thing.
And
Using the phrase weapons of mass destruction.
right. And Hugo Chavez opposed the war in Iraq as well, which put us at odds. Venezuela has been a leader regionally as well. These are various groups that they've been a leader in, including economic organizations. Venezuela has ties with China, Russia, Iran, and BRICS, which challenge U.S. hegemony abroad. Ideologically, Venezuela has in its history embraced socialism and opposed neoliberalism, privatization, and free market reforms. The Bolivarian Revolution, once again associated with Simón Bolívar and championed by Hugo Chavez, is associated with those things. So it basically, like Iran, like China, like Cuba, shows the possibility of a world that's not dominated by the U.S. I think that's very scary for the U.S. So, okay, so let's go forward to just a few disclaimers, then we'll end my lecture. Thank you all for listening, and then we'll do a brief discussion. So we talked about the Venezuela map. A few notes about symbols. Codepink generally uses the 8-star flag that Jennifer crocheted, but there's another 7-star version which is older and is associated with the opposition movement. So just be careful what images you're posting when it comes to these symbols. And finally,
Codepink wants the 8 stars. Like I don't like it.
right, you might want to count before posting something, but that's just to be aware of. I'm not familiar with the history behind this, but this is the official one on the right over here. This is the official name of the country, so we try to respect that. And here are some slogans that are mainly associated with the opposition movement. And like I said, however you feel about the current state of Venezuela, our goal here is to oppose U.S. intervention and warmongering in Venezuela. And so these are associated with people who are advocating for regime change by the U.S. or the opposition movement. So just be aware that SOS Venezuela, Save Venezuela, Freedom for Venezuela, these are slogans generally put together by the
Can we still see it? I don't know.
yeah.
I don't want to restart it.
If
Should I
you can
restart?
click here.
Okay, I'll just go back to
Okay.
hurry back.
Um,
There, okay.
Hands off Venezuela is one of the slogans that we use. Lift sanctions, peace in Venezuela, let Venezuela be. These are slogans that we prefer when talking about our campaign. And if we can go back to our slideshow over there, we'll just start with a discussion. So these are some things that I am curious about your perspectives on, but before we begin, do you guys have any questions about the history we went over?